talking to Graham Millward to find out about his project to help family members who have concerns about an older driver. Graham, can you explain why you found it necessary to start this campaign?
Yeah, sure. I should take you back to 2008, really, to explain. That's when I joined a local authority down in Hampshire and became part of their road safety team, looking after the driver training, mainly for business drivers at first, but also which I'd had lots of experience with, but also in their scheme for older drivers over 60. And I found this scheme much more interesting. The large part of it was just standard assessments, like many local authorities carry out, where you attract people who have already got an interest in safety. So it's debatable about whether you make much of a difference. And there's certainly been no evidence to show that affects casualties or reduces casualties, that sort of approach. But this one was different because it coordinated with local doctors, medical professionals, and they referred drivers where there were already safety concerns. Drivers with cognitive impairment, even diagnosed dementia, that were coming right to the end of their safe driving careers, and rather than just advising refresher training when there are any problems, which tends to happen on most schemes, this one was a case of, because it's a progressive condition, it was a case of just, do they need to stop driving at this point, or can we safely sort of agree they carry on for a bit longer, maybe another 6 months, maybe another year, and then monitor it. And of course, in some cases, we had to advise that they stop driving. So that's the unusual bit, really. It's actually taking potentially unsafe drivers off the road before they can cause a problem. And there were a few issues with the scheme, and I sort of, over the years, tightened things up a little bit, improved the way we did things, and it became a passion of mine, not least because of the hundreds of families we helped over the years who were, at the end of their tether, really, in terms of what do I do about this older relative who we believe is not safe, and they had nowhere to turn to. And so we were able to step in and advise and arrange an assessment in the person's own car on the roads they normally drive on. So one thing I noticed was that this was a unique scheme. It only worked in Hampshire, despite its success, and it did win an International Road Safety Award for being one of the only scheme, as far as I'm aware, that has demonstrated a direct link with casualty reduction in the areas it operated, because we're taking the most unsafe drivers off the road. And it wasn't being copied or replicated anywhere else in the UK. And although we could see the benefit of this scheme, no one else seemed really interested. So once I retired from Hampshire County Council, I've now set up my own campaign, really, to try and replicate this approach by training driving instructors, ADIs, up to know how to spot the signs in driving of a cognitive impairment, and how to then do a risk assessment based on the evidence of spatial awareness, multitasking, concentration, attention, decision making, this type of thing. All signs which are relatively straightforward to spot once you've been trained in the right manner, and that's not including medical training particularly. So that was why I got so into this subject.
But how can ADIs assess fitness to drive?
Well, that's a really good question, because a lot of people actually misunderstand what we're trying to do here. ADIs can't assess fitness to drive. That's the first thing. It needs medical input, so it's generally based on medical evidence. And all we're trying to do really is advise those medical professionals what the driving's actually like. The majority of DVLA medical inquiries into licensing, where, say, for example, dementia has been notified, are based on medical opinion, often relying on the person's GP or consultant to give advice on that to DVLA so they can then decide on whether to reissue a license or not. And it's an unfair ask, really, of medical professionals because it's not their main area of expertise, of course, driving. They don't really want to get too involved with that, and they generally never seen the patient but behind the wheel to see how what they're driving is actually like. So they're making a bit of a stab in the dark based on what they understand about the medical condition, and of course, they often get it wrong. Stop people driving when they don't really need to, and more often, and more of a safety issue is when they let them carry on when perhaps they should have been stopped. So, what we're suggesting is that ADIs, given the right training of how to spot these things I'd already mentioned about spatial awareness, multitasking deficits, etc., and they are, as I say, quite easy to spot. I'm writing that down on a risk assessment report to see what the evidence there is, which is extremely useful for the doctor to make a decision on fitness to drive and then advise DVLA of that. So it's a risk assessment, not a fitness to drive assessment, and that's what we're aiming to basically enable more areas of the UK to have access to that service, which, on the other hand, helps family members who spot these changes in somebody's driving at a very early age, at a very early stage, and when they have no help to do anything about their concerns or not sufficient help, then that person can carry on driving for many more months because the DVLA inquiry often takes many months whilst they're unsafe, and that's when these sort of catastrophic type of collisions can happen.